Welcome to the Plant-Free MD podcast with Dr. Anthony Chafee, where we discuss diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease, and show you how you can use this to optimize your health and happiness, both mentally and physically. Hey everyone, it's Dr. Anthony Chafee here again with the Plant-Free MD podcast. Today I have a very special guest who's the founder and creator of the Carnivore Bar, Phillip Meece, who is kind enough to join me today to talk about Carnivores Bar, as you guys know, is my main sponsor, and to talk about everything carnivore as well. Phillip, thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, not a problem. So can you tell us a bit about yourself and what made you want to start the Carnivore Bar in the first place?
So I could start the story in many different places. Sick kid, but I got better, but then I deployed. I went to Afghanistan as a combat medic. I struggled to find healthy food. I was into CrossFit, doing paleo, just trying to work out a terrible diet and no sleep. And I got wrecked. So I was on a broad spectrum antibiotic, got dysbiosis, and spent the next 7 to 8 years health hacking my way to frustration till I found Jordan Peterson, tried to clean my room and get my life together. And then he started talking about this crazy carnivore diet and Michaela. And I was like, well, heck, I have nothing to lose, so I'll try that too. I tried it and lost 40 pounds, changed my life, just revolutionized everything about like what I was doing and where I was going and what I wanted to do with my life. And so I realized that all that frustration that I had while I was deployed in Afghanistan was, coming to this head. It's like, well, maybe the most useful and meaningful thing I can do is solve this healthy food on the battlefield thing. Yeah. So I created the Carnivore Bar.
Oh, very good. Yeah, I have some friends of mine that are in like special forces and things like that, and I've talked to them about this, and they've mostly gone on carnivore, and like they will actually have to bring their own food sometimes because they won't have it available. So like I have a buddy of mine, his wife will send him a Yeti cooler full of like frozen ribeyes, like out to wherever he's going. So he just has this big cooler full of steaks that he can keep eating on, because you don't necessarily have the same access to food as you would otherwise.
Well, they send you MREs too. So I mean, it's a compounding problem. You're eating preservative-laden food. That's not ideal. And even in the Army's ARs, their regulations, they have like these memorandums that explain how tools are to be used. It describes never being on the MREs for more than 21 days. But we have soldiers that are eating MREs for 15 months. And so the preservatives they don't stop working just because you put them inside your body. Yeah. Your microbiome has to help you absorb whatever food you're eating. And if you're in a war-torn country endemic with malaria, you're probably on a prophylactic for, they don't want the troops to get sick. So if they put you on a broad spectrum antibiotic like doxycycline, there are several others, but that's just one. Malaria will kill you dead. And if it passes through a body of troops, like it can kill, it's against malaria. So it's not serious threat. But the intervention that the Army medicine decided, in combination with MREs, just wipes you out. It is a complete recipe for dysbiosis. And so there are twofold challenges. There's the terrain element of your digestive tract just being wrecked. And then there's also like, well, how do you even get healthy food out there? If you have a Yeti cooler full of ribeyes, it's like special forces have special privileges. They have access to a grill. They have access to their own workout equipment. Like, they're provided a little bit of freedom, lax standards for grooming. They integrate with the populations that they're trying to, work with to accomplish our goals and our missions. So they're on the tip of the spear, but the average soldier, the body of troops that deploy you may be on a fob where there's a mess hall and state-of-the-art equipment and cooks doing their utmost to provide healthy nutrition. You know, we as carnivores may disagree about their result, but it's valiant and it's effortful, and I appreciate those soldiers and those efforts. But when it comes to the shelf-stable component, I think they have absolutely failed. I don't think that is adequate in any shape, way, or form. It's not nutritionally complete, and the nutrition that is claimed in it is claimed in it by merit of bureaucratic, formulas. Like they have a spreadsheet of non-bioavailable vitamins that they've just shoved in there and mixed up into the peanut butter, and like, good luck pooping for the next week. Like, you're just set up for this miserable nutritional experience, if you can even call it that. And I think that there was a real need to create something that would sustain people in those kind of environments.
Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. But for those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right, thanks guys.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I mean, this is really a throwback to what armies have used literally for thousands of years. Pemmican were the iron rations that troops would use quite often. I mean, even the British used pemmican fighting the Americans in the Revolutionary War. They found, and this is how we know that pemmican lasts such a long time, is because we actually found caches of the Imperial Army of their pemmican 50 years after the Revolutionary War. It was still good, so this stuff lasts a long time, and that's why they use it as iron rations.
Yeah, there's a history of pemmican, especially in the British or Commonwealth forces, because of the Hudson Bay Company, and they have this huge fur trade in the 1600s, and they even had a pemmican war, fighting over the right to hunt bison. So they fought over the hunting grounds for the bison because it became a commodity. If it hadn't become a commodity, we probably would never know about it. But descendants of French traders and Native Americans, they turned it into this commodity product, sold it to fur traders who were on the go, burning thousands of calories a day, like out in the brush, trying to get as many pelts as humanly possible to ship them back over to Great Britain. So they don't have time to plant crops or harvest or even hunt or field trip. Like they are moving with a purpose in some of the most harsh terrains up in the Northeast Great Lakes area. And so they are, pedal to the metal, maybe even like 5,000, 6,000 calories wouldn't be that much if you're trying to forge a trail. Mm-hmm. And continually expand deeper and deeper into the woods, because that's where the beavers still are. Any place that's been explored is no good. All the beaver are gone, all the pelts are harvested. You have to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's energy demanding like you just can't imagine. Mm-hmm. And so the British, they learned. It became a field ration because they were in the business of winning.
Yeah, and obviously, the Native Americans were using this since time immemorial, really, and likely the mammoth hunters of far gone past were also making these sorts of things, like either pemmican or drying it in some way to preserve it. And yeah, you would wonder if like the fur trappers, they wouldn't just eat the meat of the animals that they trapped, but I suppose that you don't always know when that's coming in, and it doesn't last that long either.
And you never know when they've been caught. So if you're using snares, they may not be fresh. So, insects have gotten it. It's not been, you didn't take it down, you've trapped it. And so, it could be a few days. And then there's the question of, the macros, whether or not it's fatty enough. I've heard beaver is actually pretty fatty. So like beaver, porcupine, badger does have enough fat mass, but that's like a whole nother problem. It's like if you were planning on hunting, deer is probably not going to cut it. You need something bigger, like a bison or caribou, elk. And we've kind of decimated those herds and in many continents around the world. So it's few and far between where you're even going to find big enough game with enough biomass, with enough fat mass. Like you're saying, mammoth is how we started.
Yeah.
It's like, well, if we grew up on mammoth, if we grew these brains on mammoth, it's like, how do we replicate that fat mass? It's like, well, it may not be balanced. The carcass may not be balanced compared to what ancestrally we would have eaten. So we have to do extra work in cultivating, thinking ahead. And Pemmican is one of those ways where you can kind of, fill in the gaps. When I go on holidays are coming up. It's like, mom might make you a sirloin cooked in butter, but it's like maybe 3 or 4 grams of butter on the leanest sirloin you've ever seen that's overcooked all the way well done. And it's like, thanks. Because this year they didn't use, they remembered not to use pepper, but like still like energy wise, man, you're hurting because you don't have any fat.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a problem too. A lot of people, when they say, oh, they don't have any energy or anything like that, it's often they're not eating enough fat or just not eating enough in general. But most people, because they're eating so much more fat than they've ever eaten in their life, they think, well, I must be eating enough fat. That can't be the problem. But it often is, because you tend to need a lot of fat.
Yeah. And it's not only like energy signaling, it's just like you want your system to feel like you've had enough. You want your leptin, you want your hormones, you want all of those markers to say, okay, we're good. You don't want to be in this continuously stressed kind of like hungry all the time. That's going to set you up for failure. A lot of new carnivores, they suffer from cravings. And it's like, you need those chemical signals to like, okay, good, we're good. We have what we need. And if you don't get that, eating too much protein to bring it back to the frontier can lead to rabbit starvation. So protein poisoning. It's essentially you're eating too lean an animal over and over and over again. Rabbits, they have almost no body fat on them at all. So you can hunt and eat meat all day and still perish because it doesn't have enough fat. And that's one of the scary things about just the ecological things that we've done to the world, where we haven't maintained wild, large animals. We've just turned it all into parking lots and suburbs. And, or then we've turned it into monoculture crops that are just kind of depleting the topsoil. It's like, we really need to think about this differently. It's not so simple. If you're thinking about things ecologically and what human beings need to, not only to survive in the weakest sense, but actually to thrive, that's a different equation.
Yeah, it is. And that's sort of is very topical now, because there's this big push here. You got your shirt, eat beef, not bugs. And that's the thing. We're getting pushed into eating plant-based fake meat, or bug burgers, things like that. And I mean, at least bug is an animal, and I don't know the fat content, but at least it's is going to have sort of animal proteins and fats and things like that in it as well. But it's certainly it's no steak by any stretch of the imagination as far as nutrient content or flavor, I'm sure. But so what would be your sort of take on that? We're being told that in order to save the world and to save humanity, that we need to start eating bugs and plant-based meat. Is beef really all that bad for the planet?
No, I think that beef is our one and only hope to survive in the next couple thousand years. So I think topsoil is by far our least renewing natural resource. It takes about 1,000 years to create 11 centimeters. And we're depleting it and wasting it on corn, and then we're burning that. So the problem with saying fat is fat or protein is protein, and then ignoring chemistry and pretending like chemistry and biology don't exist, is a huge, huge, huge problem. It's kind of like saying, well, oil is mostly carbon and diamonds are carbon. So I'm just going to take diamonds and put them in a gas tank and then turn the ignition and see what happens. It's like, it's that foolish. It's like, you cannot be so scientifically illiterate about this chemistry. Like the amino acids that make up human beings are not found in bugs. Like some of them are, but not at the right ratios. And it has almost no carnitine. L-carnitine is really, really critical for human beings and human health, especially if you are a strict carnivore. Because if you're strict carnivore, you know, your energy source is fat. So you have to have the fat. There's no saturated, like palmitic fat. Palmitic acid and stearic acid are the two really, really important fatty acids that are found basically in ruminant fat. That's where you would have found it ancestrally. You know, so there are some tropical plants, like cacao has pretty high stearic acid, but obviously that is a very small sliver, especially during the ice age where we, you know, grew up evolutionarily, where you would have had access to it. And it needs a lot of work. Whereas ruminants are basically ubiquitous, especially where human beings flourished. And so it's this equation of like, what does a human being optimally need? So for my question as a combat medic, it's like, MRE wasn't it. Okay, well, what is it? And so we were thinking meat MRE, but shucks, it doesn't have like the antioxidants, the fruits and the veggies, the green leafy vegetables. Like, what am I going to do about those things? And so I kind of just let it on the shelf, did my health hacking, suffered and spent tons of money I didn't have on health hacking gadgets and gizmos and supplements that didn't help me at all. So I was spinning my wheels, doing green smoothies. I'd say with the fiber, without the fiber. Maybe it's the fiber, I'll juice. You know, maybe it's, you know, I need more probiotics. I'll ferment. Or maybe I'll take you know, this powder of green vegetables that's mixed up that has more diversity. It's like, I looked at the actual chemistry and there was almost none of it was bioavailable. And I'm just like, what? Like this complete paradigm is just shattering. It's like, this is not bioavailable. There's, you know, spinach has things, it's good in iron, has iron. It's like, okay, well, but it actually competes and actually absorbs iron. And the iron that you eat that's in the spinach even takes more iron from you because it's not heme iron. So it can leach iron. The reason it has iron content is because it's leaching iron into it from the soil and from you. And so it can actually make you more anemic if you overdo it on spinach. And many grains are similar where they have that phytic acid and they're pulling minerals from the soil and from the air. Like they are trying to build their structures and they don't stop just because you put it inside you again. You know, everything is trying to stay alive. Yeah. And, you know, animals, they run, they fight. It's work to get the animal. The plants, they use chemistry. And our chemistry, like illiteracy, it puts us at a huge disadvantage there because, you know, bugs and these fake meats and these lab grown meats, there's no reason we couldn't make lab grown meats. It's just going to take 1,000 years because in order to do it right, you're going to have to analyze every single amino acid in every format. It's going to cost, you know, $500 trillion. And then you're going to make a square this big. Or you could let cows eat grass. And or you can spend 1,000 years doing this R&D project to make lab grown meat effective. The thing is they're going to spend a couple $1 million and try to ramrod something that's 2% of what the human body needs that's not bioavailable, just like they did with the MREs. And so no to your half-assed science. Like, it's not gonna work. It's like you either do the chemistry, you spend all the money in the world 7 times over, and you do the science right, or you accept in humility that the natural process is more advanced than our science really has the capacity to offer.
Yeah.
And if you understand that, then it's like, well, if we're going to have our, scientific literate ecological discussions, then we need to approach this with a little more humility, because these biological processes are not for the faint of heart. It's like the F-22 Raptor Joint Strike Force Fighter is a rock compared to the human body. It is nothing. Like, as far as the complexity of a single cell in the mitochondria, it's like, no, we're only like tapping the surface of that. And so when the mitochondria, pumps up 90 to 155 ATP when you put fat in it, and it pumps out 36 when you put carbohydrate in it, it's like, you look at this cellular biology and we're just kind of amazed at how efficient it is. It's like, wow, it can use garbage and will still work. It's like, but it's doing so much better on ketones, on fatty acids, on this beta oxidation. It's like, maybe we just need to step back and say, well, this is what is working for the cellular biology. It's like, maybe we should go with that.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's a matter of being so sharp. You're so smart. Yeah, so sharp you'll cut yourself. And it's like, oh, we're so clever. We're going to figure out all these sorts of things, and you end up just hurting yourself because you're being too clever by half, but not actually recognizing what is actually happening here. The system is very complex, and like you say, eventually we might be able to figure it out in a way that we can replicate this from other sources, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. It's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to take a long time. And right now, like you say, we have a pretty poor product. This fake meat stuff is just, it looks like a chemistry experiment. The ingredients that are in there, most of those are bad for you. And not all of the so-called nutrients are either bioavailable or appropriate. So it's certainly not something that we have been able to accomplish yet. And when the further you get away from the natural workings of the world, I think the more trouble you're going to get into, because you can deny reality all you want, but reality will win every time. And it's just it's just going to catch up, because it's like that is the reality. And I was thinking too, like you were saying about topsoil. Topsoil is a major resource that is very limited. And when we're tilling the ground, we're churning up the ground to be able to plant seeds. That makes it loose and available for the wind to blow it off, for the rain to wash it away. And so we're actually losing 27.5 billion tons of topsoil every year. That's a area the size of Kentucky every single year of topsoil. That's a limited resource. And like you say, it takes 1,000 years to get, an inch or so of topsoil, and or less than an inch. And that is a very limited resource. When we came to America first, colonial period, and started moving out west, the topsoil was some insane. It was like something like 7 or 8 feet deep, and so you could just grow crop after crop after crop without any problem, because the soil was so rich. And that's because of all the big, massive ruminant animals that were moving through the Great Plains, and eating the grasses. The grasses were tall; they were like 9 feet tall. There's stories of the explorers saying that they could tie grass in knots over their horses' heads. So, just thank God there were no tigers around back then, so just going through the tall grass.
That's the thing, the absence of, the industrialized civilization, where we're doing all these cereal grains in kind of a strip mining way, allowed basically North America to rest and accumulate all that biomass. It's like that's the natural way that things are supposed to be. And even if you ate vegetables or you ate fruit, like even from the 60s, it's like 500% more vitamins. It's a not bioavailable form, but if it's 500% more, it's like, well, maybe you're actually getting something from these fruits and vegetables. But today's fruits and vegetables are so depleted in that you're getting the punch of the carbs, you're getting the oxidative stress, but you're not getting any kind of compensatory nutrition at all. And so it's just water and sugar and color, water, sugar. And it's like, well, good profit margins on that, but it's not something that is going to benefit you or help your performance. And so that's kind of the rub with performance-based nutrition, is where I think we overlap a lot of our interests. Is, I kind of denigrated American battlefield nutrition, but I didn't really kind of denote where it went wrong. It kind of went wrong in Ansel Keys, the K ration. So that was his pet project. The military has always been used as a proving ground, an experiment for diets and other things. Not going to say that, but we're always the guinea pigs of whatever great new idea turns up. So when it comes to food, they actually did a head-to-head test with K rations, and they did Pemmican, and they didn't transition them to keto diet at all. They doubled the fat of the Pemmican. So it's Pemmican is very fatty. It's 80% of your calories from fat, but they added even more. They made it extra fatty and then took all salt out. So they did a 2-week test and basically guaranteed to give these people an electrolyte imbalance and basically rinse them through, because they couldn't handle that much fat all of a sudden. So then they had them go do hard labor. And so Ansel Keys just absolutely assassinated Pemmican because he knew it was better, is my suspicion. But he knew it was the obstacle because it had this great legend. It had, the British Commonwealth forces were using it. And so he had to first take that down. Europe, after the World War II, has been decimated. The European scientific community is in shambles. There's no one to call us on our BS. And so Ansel Keys takes that opportunity, assassinates the legend of Pemmican, puts forth the K ration with candy and cigarettes in it, and basically starts us on this train of nostalgia-based nutrition, which is effectively taking jelly donuts and smearing it on your rifle, to make it remember home. It's like, no, this is war. You don't need nostalgia. You need cleaning, lubricant, and protectorant. For a human body, you are a weapons platform. You need amino acids. You need those amino acids from red meat, and you need a fuel source, preferably fatty acids, so that you have sustained energy, so that you're awake and focused for the type of work that we need you to do. And so it's that crazy analogy of the jelly donuts and rifle that, like, we just don't think about what it is, the function we're setting our soldiers, our troops up to do. We're not trying to make them homesick. We're trying to keep them alive.
Yeah.
So it's like, what are we doing here?
Guys, is there anything that guy did that wasn't just complete and utter rubbish? Like, I just can't stand that guy. People talk about like, well, yes, he was bought and paid for by the sugar companies. Yes, he did a lot of fraudulent, research and published fraudulent data. But, think of all the good things he did. I mean, that's like saying, think of all the, what about all the good things Hitler did? He really liked dogs. He was a vegetarian too. And so, it was.
Not go over way. It
did
not go over well for Kanye.
And so, that's the thing, with Ansel Keys, is that like everything that guy has ever done is suspect to me. I can't trust a single thing that he's done, whether or not he was ever a decent scientist, which generally you would have to be to get into the position that he was to sell his influence. But you cannot trust anything that's ever come out of that guy, because he's utterly corrupt, and he's so self-serving that anything that guy has ever touched, you have to be suspicious of. And I guess this is another thing, designing this study in order to fulfill a certain result, that is the antithesis of a scientific mind and experiment.
Well, it's the problem with it's trying to make a profit versus trying to save lives. So like my business with the Carnivore Bar is about trying to save lives. And, I basically had to turn a blind eye to cost because for me as a carnivore who needs the product to live, it didn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter if I'm selling at a loss. It doesn't matter if the R&D costs just kind of spiral out of control. I get to be alive at the end of it. I was doing 12-hour shifts in the ER and I was like, there's nothing for me to eat here. And I'm too tired to meal prep every day. And I'm sure you have similar experiences. It's like, well, what do you eat that isn't like jerky? It isn't too lean. And so for me, like, I was just started spending every weekend I had making my own pemmican. And, because I needed it to work. And this insidious, like, to kind of bring it back to Ansel Keys, this insidious, like, K ration as a means to make money. Everything about food manufacturing is about lowering the quality of the ingredients. Like, say you were making something completely unrelated to meat, like an oatmeal cookie. You'd make the best oatmeal cookie you could with the best ingredients you could. Then you take it to a food scientist and they would show you how you could spend pennies on the dollar getting the crappiest ingredients to taste sort of like that cookie. And then you'd have a profit margin and then you could mass produce it. You would go through a co-packer. They would do all the work for you. You'd never even see the oatmeal cookie that you invented. They'd put it in cellophane and off the door it'd go, and you're a millionaire. It's like, that's food. Everything is preservative and chemical and the lowest possible quality ingredient they can get away with. So if you start with pemmican, with something like the highest grass-fed, grass-finished beef that you can do, like, you are just absolutely destroying profit margin. You are anti-profit, anti-money, because there's money and then there's like infinite value. And like, if you have something that can save someone's life, I would argue, it's like the price of a tourniquet. Well, if you need a tourniquet, it's worth everything. If you don't need a tourniquet, it's, well, I don't know. I'll pick a number when I don't need it. But when you need it, you need it. And so the problem with food is that redesigning how we make food to make it, coherent and consistent with science and consistent with the ecology that's going to lead to a future with us on this planet, it's going to take decades. And so it's going to need an investment from people who believe that meat is important and they don't want to eat bugs. They're going to have to take actions in the real world to prevent this horrible fork to keep happening, because my prices have just gone way up. And I think right now we're in this false calm because the droughts over here in the States, everyone liquidated their herd. So they didn't get full weight.
Wow.
Because they were losing weight. They were losing weight on the hoof. So they slaughtered them. So beef is okay right now. Herd size have been decimated, and they were decimated before in 2020 when they culled them because they were worried. So we're culling chicken, we're culling all kinds of animal agriculture, moving straight towards this. And it's like, well, this is a great time, not just to buy Carnivore Bars, not to be a shameless self-plug, but go meet your rancher, go learn how to make pemmican for yourself. Like, take responsibility to maintain your individual sovereignty, because if you don't have meat, if you don't have your health, everything else really doesn't really matter. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you ask anyone who's sick or dying, something like that, that's always what your health is more valuable than anything. And a lot of people, when they're getting older, getting closer to passing away, they always say things like that. I wish I took care of myself more. I wish I spent time with my family more. The things that really matter all of a sudden come to bear. I wish I didn't do these things that made me unhealthy. I wish I would have, done these things better. I wish I would have spent more time with my kids and my wife and things like that. And
human life is what matters. And it's like, well, good food is what keeps them alive.
That's it.
Like, we should invest in that.
Yeah, well, definitely. And that's why, I've had a lot of people sort of approach me as sponsoring the show, and I haven't really been interested. But I thought it would be a good idea here, because like that's something that I think is important to have these products available, because if that meets commercial success, that will get other companies, the industrial companies saying like, oh, hey, there's a market here and we're losing out. This is something we should look into. And it will force other people to change the track and not produce the crappy, oatmeal cookie, but, say, hey, well, maybe people actually, give a crap about their health, and this is what they're considering healthy. Let's give them a product.
I really, really appreciate that. It means the world that affiliates promote the product and want the product. It's like we started as a Kickstarter, and we wouldn't exist without dedicated carnivores that truly believe, in not being without fatty meat. And, I kind of threw myself out there. It's like, well, would you guys want this? And everyone said, yes, go for it, and I was completely, in over my head, but I've just been figuring it out bit by bit, because I think that it's beyond being famous. It's beyond being rich. It's beyond any of these things. If I can help just a few people, like, that'll make my effort worth it and make it matter. And so that's kind of the goal, to find some, Jordan Peterson reference, to find some kind of meaning in my life, is to solve this problem for a community that I believe in, and that has greatly helped me. Like, my dysphoria is just absolutely vanished. I got labeled with the PTSD after the Army, and I really didn't feel like that fit. I didn't feel like that story fit. I had dysbiosis as far as I was concerned. And when I started eating a species appropriate diet, everything got better for me. And so, man, oh man, I will not be without it again.
Yeah. There was, have you come across the book, Brain Energy by Dr. Chris Palmer from Harvard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't read it, but I've heard of good things about it.
Yeah. So I'm reading it now, and I'm going to have him on the show next week.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's very interesting. And he makes sort of the same assertion that underlying, the common denominator underlying all psychiatric issues is metabolic issues at the level of the mitochondria, just like most other diseases, that we're seeming to find more and more and more relationship between the mitochondria and these diseases. And so when your mitochondria, obviously they're the powerhouse of your cells, they create ATP, that is the currency of your cells, and that's what makes them run. But they're not just sitting there just pumping out ATP that just sort of floats around. They actually move around your cytoskeleton of the cell, and they go to this area, release a bunch of ATP, go to this area, release a bunch of ATP in that area. And that promotes the actions of the machinery and that cellular structure at that area. So they'll go here, bang, release a bunch of ATP that will release a bunch of neurotransmitters, which will actually work on the mitochondria as well as working on other neurons. And
Wow.
and so there's this massively complicated relationship, and that when you disrupt the energy production capabilities of your mitochondria, that functionality goes down, and it's so complex and it's so intricate. It's a very, very finely tuned precision instrument. I mean, it's more precision than anything that we've ever made. And so obviously it can go off very easily. And so if you do that, then you're going to have serious issues. You're going to get imbalances in your neurotransmitters. The function of your neurotransmitters are going to be different. Those are going to affect the function of your mitochondria as well. So it's very intricate and very complex, but he finds that all of these different psychiatric conditions like schizophrenia, major depression, anxiety, OCD, bipolar disease, like these bipolar disorder, they all come down to the level of the mitochondria not working right. And
yeah, that's what I felt. It was like horrible dysphoria, no focus. Like someone pulled my batteries. I just could not get right.
Yeah. And how are you feeling now?
I mean, I feel so I bit off a little bit more than I could chew with the business, but the first year of Carnivore was euphoric. I felt better than I've ever felt. I was speaking of mitochondria. I was studying Dr. Michael Eads. He did a presentation about hyperlipid, where he talks about the FADH2 over NADH ratio of fats. Long story short, it was the saturated fats from animals that was sending the reactive oxygen species to make you selectively insulin resistant, which was simultaneously creating more mitochondria, and then it was also making your fat cells less fat selectively. So then that sugar that's supposed to be in your bloodstream goes and does other things, like your obligate glucose metabolites, like in your eyes, or your erythrocytes, your red blood cells. They're obligate glucose. So they have to use the glucose in your bloodstream. But if you are so insulin sensitive everywhere systemically, it's having to fight for that. So you have to keep going higher and higher and higher on the sugar to get it where it needs to go so that you can be alert and oriented. But if you're keto adapted and you specifically, not every fat, but these saturated animal fats, it selects for that mitochondria function. And that was what started getting my eyes wide. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this might be the thing to actually help, is make sure people have saturated animal fat. But it's a little hard to transport. It's like, well, you don't want to have like a fatty steak in a Ziploc bag, like purse meat kind of. I've seen it and I've done it. But there needs to be a better way. And so I thought, like, if I did this Kickstarter, maybe I could get that fat that seems to do all those things you were talking about with mood. And I don't know exactly what was wrong with my brain, but it was not working. So the Army docs pumped me full of methylphenidate, which is basically meth. It's to get me to focus, and then my anxiety explodes, and then I discontinue that because I can't handle the anxiety, and I can't work. And it's like, man, my life is just spiraling and grinding into this terrible, painful ball of dysfunction. And it's like, I eat fatty meat, stop eating green leafy vegetables, everything is better.
Yeah.
When I cheat, it goes right back.
Yeah.
No going back for me.
Yeah. Well, that's what I've noticed too. And, when I even just get like a bit of greens or something like that, or like spices, seasonings on something, if I'm at a restaurant, I'm like, is this going to cause a big deal? And it does. It actually affects me and in ways that I don't like. Some of it's quite mild, maybe it's some spices, just get my face gets a bit itchy, or my nose gets stuffy, or something minor like that. But other things actually make me feel pretty rotten and quite depressed sometimes, especially the greens. For some reasons, those really get me. And yeah.
I get foggy. Like, it's hard for me to remember or stay focused on what I'm talking about. Like, I just get really distracted and disoriented. Brain fog.
Right.
I can't do that. And I can't do honey, which is ironic because I sell a honey bar, and it messes me up.
So what made you want to do the honey bar in the first place?
So trying to be responsible as a business owner, because I started as kind of a zealot. I was a purist, and I didn't want to compromise, and I wanted to tell everyone to eat the right food, eat plain meat. And I kind of realized that I want to put people first. I want to meet them where they are, and I want to move them, where they're comfortable eating more meat. Kids sometimes have trouble, like, going all the way. Like, so if I can compromise a little bit and not be dogmatic, I can operate a business of which I can only eat 2 or 3 of the products.
Yeah.
But I struggle with that for a long time. I don't want to be dogmatic, but I do think those elements are suboptimal.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like some people can handle them more than others, but I do think they're suboptimal. And I listened to Dr. Ken Berry talk about fructose not showing up on the A1C. on the glycation test. It's A1C is the main test we do to see how glycolated your red blood cells are. And the test is designed specifically to find metabolites of glucose glycation. And so it's a complete like black hole, how much damage fructose is doing. And honey is high fructose. So we're trying to keep the honey low.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to promote the zero carb bar with affiliates like you who are strict. And thanks to your involvement in our brand, we have seen a precipitous shift towards grass salted away from honey. So
yeah.
I hope that continues.
Yeah, like so I saw that Ken Berry talk about that, which I thought was really interesting. I hadn't even really thought about that before, but it makes sense. Obviously, Dr. Saladino likes fructose if it comes from honey or fruit, which to me I don't think makes a lot of sense, just because it's still the same chemical, and you have to find something in fruit and honey that are then going to mitigate the effects of fructose somehow, and explain that to me, because I don't see why it would act differently otherwise. Are they going to have other things that are there, like vitamins and minerals and nutrients that are good for you in other ways? Sure. But that doesn't mean that it changes the effect of the fructose in your body. And so, Dr. Saladino did a video saying that, actually it does show up on your HbA1c. It shouldn't have any of these hidden dangers. And he explained why he thought so and discussed some studies. And then immediately after that, Professor Bart Kay does like an hour-long rebuttal of that. It's going like, actually, that's not a correct interpretation of the data. Here's what it actually says. And so it's an interesting discussion anyway, being had in this community. But I think at the end of the day, you can just go back to first principles. Humans evolved and been eating it during the ice ages, where there was no fruit and honey available, period, whatsoever. So this isn't something that is required. Now we can discuss on how much harm it causes, or if it maybe causes some sort of benefit or whatever, but it certainly is not required. There are people throughout the world, entire civilizations right now, that have never eaten fruit, never eaten honey, never taken in exogenous carbohydrate that did not exist in animal products, and they are flourishing. Okay, so it doesn't what am I trying to say? That means it is not required. It doesn't have to be in your diet. Sorry?
It's a freeload. And so I'm making a survivor bar. And so if it doesn't add to your survival, it's more jelly donut, like on the rifle. It's not CLP. And so I totally resonate with that. And the goal of making pemmican and cooking it as lightly as possible and keeping it as immaculately clean as possible and dry as possible with no preservatives was for that exactly reason, to do what is necessary and nothing else.
Yeah.
However, where people are in their like palatability issues is that they are so lost to all of the flavors and the cornucopia of poison that they have to choose from, that, I have to make enough sales to get people to pay for the unsalted carnivore bar, which is my favorite.
Yeah.
Like, this one's mine. This is my breakfast tomorrow. I just pull it off the counter. But that's my passion, is to find exactly what you need, nothing more, nothing less, and use ancestral traditions, hence the cave painting, because that is the oldest art in the world. That's auroch. It's extinct now.
Yeah.
It's a nod to the mammoths, which are also extinct now. It's like, well, how do we eat a human diet with new flora and fauna and flora and fauna that we have cultivated and skewed to such a horrible degree that it is unrecognizable from its ancestral version? And so that is a conundrum that I don't know how to enter into as a citizen scientist, as a biology enthusiast, and a business owner. It's just like, I'm trying to be open-minded as to the potential dangers of honey, or the potential innocuousness of it. because there is continuous debate, but for me, it doesn't work. And ironically, but for my wife, it does.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I don't know, babe. But she seems to do fine. And so at least with the carnivore bar, you're getting a huge dose of protein and you're getting fat that's satiating. And you're getting minimal carbs and you're getting it from a natural source. It's still probably inflammatory, but at least those harms are mitigated and you're getting something satiating that will clue your body in to stop. And so one of the reasons that I did honey is because it improves shelf stability, it improves palatability. And if you're eating these all day, every day, there is sometimes palate fatigue when you're eating a field ration, you know? So for those reasons, I compromised. Maybe I've done a terrible sin, but like,
Well,
those are my reasons.
well, the thing is too, is that, some people do want these things, and at a certain point you do have to sort of, meet the market where it is. And in the carnivore community, there are a lot of people that have been influenced by that thought that honey is not only okay, but vital and necessary for our survival, which I don't think is,
Oh my
passes the
God.
smell test, really, because there are
Vital?
plenty of people. Yeah, well, that's actually what the argument is that you have to have carbohydrates.
Really?
What's that?
Oh no. I mean, if you want them, like if you're, I don't know if they have anything in them besides just fructose, like maybe a few proteins, maybe some immune modulating allergy, but that's unproven. That's just speculative.
No, there's nothing in there that you have to have. Absolutely not. I mean, there's how many people have gone throughout their entire life in existence, in civilizations gone generation after generation, they've never touched honey, never even seen honey or heard of it, or fruit for that matter. And no, but that's the argument, is that you cannot be in ketosis very long. You have to eat carbohydrates, which is very wrong. We have a lot of actually like really good studies showing this. And you don't need studies, because you have entire civilizations that have never eaten a carbohydrate in their entire life that did not come from meat. Maybe some glycogen that's in muscle or liver. That's it. And they've never had this stuff before. And yet this argument is like, no, you have to have carbohydrates, or these, because look at this little thing. It's like, insulin has to do with, electrolyte reabsorption in your kidneys. And so blah, blah, blah. It is nonsensical, because it doesn't matter what your study says, because in real life, that is not a thing. In real life, you have real civilizations living generationally for thousands and millions of years, never having any carbohydrates and thriving. So you cannot say that you have to have carbohydrates. I think this is just a justification for people, for their own decisions that they're making in their life. And that's fine. They get to make their own decisions, but it is honestly absurd to me that the assertion that you have to have carbohydrates in your diet.
Interesting. I didn't know the conversation had gone that far. I guess
yeah.
I'm a little too busy to get that deep. But like, there is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. There are essential fatty acids and essential amino acids defined by biology because you can't make them. So that's a clinical definition, and there are no essential carbohydrates. So it's crazy to me that they would go out on a limb like that and make a claim.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem very chemically sound.
It's not. No. I mean, well, that's the thing too. You do make carbohydrates. You do have blood sugars. You do have glycogen. You do have insulin. It's not like you stop ever producing insulin. That's not the case. And so, and again, like you say, there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. I mean, this is recognized by international medical bodies as well. Ken Berry did a great little short on that, talking about, how many carbohydrates do you need throughout your life in order to not die? And he said, according to, these different international bodies, that the answer is 0. You don't need to eat these things. You make them yourself. And there are entire civilizations living generationally that have never eaten carbohydrates. And, the thing is that a lot of these people aren't realizing is that, some people may have problems on a carnivore diet. I don't know what they're doing wrong. Could be a lot of things. Could be, eating copious amounts of liver and organs out of proportion with the animal. You kill a buffalo, you're going to have 2 years of skeletal muscle meat. You're going to have one liver that goes along with that, right? So eating liver every single day doesn't make sense. And a lot of people, like the Inuit, they don't eat any organs or liver or anything like that. They feed them to their dogs.
The liver
Yeah,
is really perishable. Like you can't preserve liver
yeah, you
as
can.
you can preserve the lean meat. And the tallow, you have to be really Johnny on the spot to get at it fast, to separate it and then get the moisture out of the tallow by rendering, or moisture out of the leaf fat by rendering it. So like there's a process from a processor's point of view, like there's a logistics problem with trying to preserve the organs. It's very, very hard to do. If you're eating it that day fresh, great. If you're doing anything else, it's going to be bad day 2.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've ever had liver that you try to thaw. You cut too big a piece of it off and then you put it in your refrigerator, and like when it's semi-frozen, that first bite, it's like, oh, okay, this is nice. It's like a multivitamin from an animal. That's pretty safe. Day 2, you let it go. It's just barely finished thawing and it's already brown. It's like, ancient people didn't have a fridge. They didn't have that advantage.
Yeah.
If they may have 1 or 2 bites, if you could eat a whole liver, but a cow, like these big animals, these ruminants, its liver is this big.
Yeah.
It's at least 50 to 60 pounds of liver. It will go bad tomorrow.
Yeah.
How much are you going to eat of that?
Well, yeah. And maybe if you had like a whole bunch of hunters there, or you had people maybe would eat it there on the spot. The Native Americans, when they would hunt, they would field dress these animals. They take down an elk or something like that. They only, because it's just one person or maybe a couple people packing this back. They had to pick and choose exactly what they wanted to pick. So they would dress it. They would take out the organs. Maybe they'd eat some of the heart or, part of the liver and things like that, but they wouldn't necessarily bring it back, and they wouldn't bring back all the organs, certainly. And they would actually cut off the hindquarters, and they would leave them there, and they would put them up, hang them up in a tree. And this is a sacrifice to the, the animal spirits and things like that. And that may well be, but what are the hindquarters? They're the most lean part of that animal. And so they have the least amount of fat. So they're leaving the things that aren't as useful to them as well, by design or by happenstance, but that is what's happening. And so then they get the forequarters and the ribs and things like that. And that's
the back fat.
Yeah, exactly.
The back fat is crucial for the caribou, especially in those northern climates. I was, this might be too much of a tangent for here at the end, but I was a missionary kid in Mongolia.
Oh, wow.
So I went in the fall of Soviet Union. Another reason why I'm a Peterson fan. We went as Christian missionaries, and they were high fat culture. So the Mongols, we went to a Mongolian barbecue where they, have like this bloodless killing where they go into the animal, they make it an incision, and they go up and they squeeze the aortic artery, and the animal just falls asleep painlessly. And then like they have this whole thing where they took kettles and they buried it with hot rocks, and then long story short, it ends with this ceremony of giving the guest of honor the tail. And these are Asian fatty-tailed sheep, not lamb, mutton, like sheep, fully grown. It's like, so the tail is this big. It's like 20 pounds minimum of fat. It's like a heart-shaped fat. And they hand that to my father. In the 90s, when we're afraid of saturated fat, we're all eating margarine to be safe. And it's like, that's an ancestral culture. Like, and he took a bite to be polite and could barely swallow it because he's so, programmed the other way. And so he takes a bite to be polite, but it's like they had fermented milk, they had fermented cheese, and they ate fat like by the
handful.
I don't even know what to call it. It's like this. It's the size of someone's whole head of just pure fat, no meat on it. And so they ate fat like it was the actual nutrition of the animal.
Yeah.
And so they ate the whole animal. They preserved everything. And it was this experience. It's just kind of in the back of my mind as a child. One of the healthiest epochs of my life, that I did all this stuff, went to be a soldier, went to go get sick, came full circle, heard about this, this healing way of eating. And then I was like, well, how can I take that healing fat, that priority of these ancestral cultures, and take that into the battlefield, into the world, into an emergency situation, and provide that life-saving nutrition anywhere that we might find ourselves.
Yeah. And that's really cool that you had that experience. That's awesome. Like, I would love to go see those guys and see how they live traditionally. That's another thing. Like, they do have a lot of, from what I understand, they use a lot of dairy products. Most of their eating just meat, but they have like a lot of fermented milk products, coarse milk generally, and even like a fermented mare's milk alcohol.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
instant dysentery for a Westerner in 3 days.
Yeah. And but at the same time, you say like, oh, well, that's a traditional humans, and they're getting carbs from the milk. So there you go. People need carbs. But in fact, they're extremely lactose intolerant. They don't get any of these carbs. They use fermented milk products. So the bacteria is eaten up all of the carbohydrates. So even they who use a lot of dairy products, and actually mare's milk is higher in lactose than cow's milk. They don't actually get any of it because they're actually extremely lactose intolerant. And so because they've never eaten this. Sorry?
So it's hot. It's hot in a bowl.
Oh yeah.
They serve it hot in a bowl, and so they have a little tent, and a ger, yurt, as people in the West are familiar with it. And they have a little stove, and they're cooking this fermented milk. And so, after it's been cooked, after it's fermented, it's like there's going to be hardly any sugar, because the microbes are using the sugar to ferment to get the alcohol. And the alcohol is like 2 to 4%. Like, it's more on the 2 than 4. Like, they were a little worried about us having it, but as kids, but like, they were drinking it all day and not being intoxicated. So it was mostly purification, not alcohol, so it was one of those things where it was a fascinating experience. And their hard cheese was sun drying on the roof, that it just, every bit of their nutrition came from an animal source. And they were healthy badasses, conquered the world. They had so much pride in their heritage in Genghis Khan, and they were mad as hell towards the Russians, who had dominated them and kept them oppressed in this economic disaster of collectivism. These prideful carnivore individualists, just kind of smothered by this oppressive communism. The mission actually went really well, because we're selling this individualism, this divine individual kind of concept with Christianity. That's not so much of a mission now with this meat story, but it's interesting how those ideologies kind of stack up on food and culture.
Yeah. And that's that I would be pretty pissed too if I was them. That was the when Genghis Khan, obviously, the empire succeeded him, obviously, and continued to expand based on his principles and the society that he built, and his sons and heirs continued on the sort of the reign of terror that he had. But they ruled like the largest contiguous empire that's ever existed for hundreds of years. And then there was some sort of cataclysm, maybe like a Krakatoa or something, like an asteroid or something like that, hit, launched up a bunch of launched up a bunch of dust particulates that sort of drowned out the sun, and a lot of the plant life died. This is exactly what Bill Gates is proposing to do and actually experimenting on in Sweden to drown out the sun. So this is somehow going to help the health of the earth by eliminating the energy source that all life on earth is derived from. I think he's one of those guys, too sharp, you'll cut yourself. I just think he's an idiot at this point for doing that. I mean, that's insane. Literally, and that's like a Bond villain level insane sort of thing to do. But that's sort of what happened back then. All the major extinctions seem to happen from something like that, or at least when that happens, you get major extinctions. And when the particulates came up, it killed off a lot of the grasslands and a lot of the plants. And horses are actually not as capable of extracting nutrients and energy from grass as well as cows are. And so the people that are in now Russia that were sort of nomadic, cow based, they were able to actually take up the slack because all the horses were dying off, and the Mongolians, like that they relied on the horses, and they weren't able to get, you look at the feces of a cow versus a horse. A horse is like, you can, an animal could still eat that. It still just looks like a ball of mushed up grass. But a cow, it's just a blob. It's just liquid, and that's because they actually get out all the fiber out of it. But the cow doesn't do it nearly as efficiently, and so they need a lot more of it in order to get the same amount of energy. And so the people that were developed, had cows and things like that, they ended up taking over, and that's where that big empire of Russia came from. That was part of the former massive Mongolian empire.
Yeah, so it's this 4-chamber stomach. It's the rumen that we don't have. Really allows the cow to really dominate, and that's why I think it's the hope of civilization. But I think you're referring in the Mongol story, the medieval cooling period, and there's a secondary element to that, and that is Kublai Khan. The Khan is like the president or the emperor. He fell in love with Chinese culture and Chinese food, and he diluted from the Mongolian perspective. He lost his Mongol roots. He lost his animal agriculture heritage. He fell in love with the civilization that they had just dominated, not realizing that obviously they had the keys to success, being the grandson of the great Chinggis. He wanted to reinvent the wheel and make it his own, this metropolitan, all these ideas are great, even though we just smashed them to dust. It's like, well, no, they're not great. You're 7 foot tall, they're 5 foot tall. You're monsters. They on horseback, inventing the stirrup, recurve bow, like shooting through armor, just maniacally strong and smart and tenacious. They conquered the world, and then they tried to emulate the people they defeated.
Right. Yeah.
So the medieval cooling, and then there's this ideological mistake, especially from the Mongols' perspective of their traditions. They would go to war with their herd. So they would take a herd of ruminants with the horses. So all the horses would come and all the livestock behind them. So they're goats and they're sheep and cows, some cows, but like all of their livestock, they never left the meat behind, and it walked with them slowly across continents. And everyone, they would burn their crops. Everyone else would starve to death. They would harvest 1 or 2 animals. They would keep breeding. And it's like, they're just unstoppable because of the food.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those tales of history. It's like, if we don't learn from it, we're destined to repeat it. And creating a solar minimum on purpose is only going to cause mass starvation. So
exactly. Yeah. I mean,
terrible idea.
Yeah. I mean, the base of the food chain, comes from things that can absorb the energy from the sun, plants, right? So, and plants and algae and all the rest that go through photosynthesis. That is where the energy for life comes from, the very bottom of the food chain. That is what every animal on Earth then subsequently gets their energy from. You limit that, you will limit the viability of life on Earth, and people, animals, and plants will die en masse.
and the microbiology, like to sequester carbon in the ground where it belongs, to create nutrition for our food, we need the methanotropes that are uniquely suited in cows. They have that 4-quad stomach. They completely digest that carbon. They do burp methane, but it is part of a natural cycle that degrades, unlike the methane that's releasing from ice or that we burn. The methane from cows is from methanotropes that fix nitrogen into the ground, sequestering carbon, and the methanotropes don't die. They eat the peat moss, they eat the methane in the ground. So like you need the cows to incubate the methanotropes that will continue to degrade and eat methane, which is like, I forget what multiple worse than carbon, but like carbon, nutrients, all that stuff needs to go in the ground. They also simultaneously fix nitrogen, which helps the plants grow. It's natural fertilizer. So not only you get the minerals, but you also get the microbiology that allows for the renewing of the topsoil, nutrients in our food, and the diversity and the life potential of any ecosystem. It needs to be grazed in order to be alive.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. People talk about animals being bad or cows being bad because they burp methane, things like that. First of all, there were hundreds of millions of buffalo throughout North America before we exterminated them all to cut off the food supply of the Native Americans. And so there was a lot of these animals around doing exactly that. And all throughout the rest of the world, there were tons and tons and tons of these animals that have now been sort of displaced because of human development and agriculture and things like that have sort of displaced these wild animals. So there used to be a lot more than there are now. And the production of methane that doesn't come from the cow, that comes from the bacteria in the cow's gut. So it's not actually from the cow doing it. No vertebrate animal can break down fiber. It's only these bacteria that can break them down. And as a byproduct of that, you get short chain fatty acids, you get protein from the bacteria dying off. You also get methane. And so that methane goes off, but that methane will be produced regardless. When fiber is being just broken down, like a tree falls down and bacteria get into that and start working it down, it also releases methane. So that same amount of methane is going to be released regardless. It's going to be released whether it's coming in the rumen of a cow or on the floor of a forest. That is just from the degradation of fiber. And that is a recycling of these nutrients that then go into these methanocyte organisms that then fix nitrogen into the soil. So these are actually normal processes in nature. And again, being so sharp, you'll cut yourself trying to interrupt a natural, very complex situation and system. You're going to get unintended consequences, law of unintended consequences. You mess with a very complicated system, something bad and unexpected is going to happen. And we need to recognize that.
It's hubristically. It's just like you can't fall prey to the vice of hubris. Like you can mess with the environment. You can think of better ways to do things if you go slow and with humility. Yeah. And what they want to do is they want to rush it. They want to turn it into an IPO. They want to make a few $1 billion and then, slap a sticker on it and sell it. It's like, that's not careful science. Yeah. And if we are not careful, in several thousand years, we won't exist. Mm-hmm. We need to invest now in animal agriculture, or we will create an ecological disaster, because it's not how much cereal grain you can make to appease the natural carnivores that are on this planet. A good way to look at it is like, if we're carnivores, if that's our optimal diet, we're being appeased with kibble. Mm-hmm. And so you have a planet swarming with 8 billion piranha, and you're appeasing like 40% with kibble. And the affluent part can kind of sort of get enough meat if they're lucky. And now as we go into a recession, everything is going to be harder and kibble is going to be too expensive. And that 60% that's doing well is now going to be 20%. And so now you don't have enough kibble and you don't have enough ammonium nitrate to make more kibble. And so ecologically, this is a disaster. People will say like, oh, you can't feed everyone a carnivore diet. It's like, well, you know what? We better get cracking then, because we need to start now at making sure we can feed everyone carnivore, because we are all, as a species, eating the same diet. If this is a zoo, one monkey doesn't eat a different diet than the other. There's an optimal diet, but somehow when it comes to human beings, we let our biases get in the way of science and doing the work and doing it appropriately. And it's like, if we want to be scientists, we need to start now at investing in animal agriculture.
Yeah. And that is the thing. People think, well, everyone's different. Everyone eats different things. So how is that possible? That doesn't exist in anywhere in nature. There are no examples of two members of the same species that have different optimal diets. Lions everywhere on earth eat the same thing. Chimpanzees everywhere on earth eat roughly the same thing. Some, depending on their areas, maybe they have more access to bugs, or some hunt other monkeys and chimpanzees. But as far as the plants that they eat the same things. And we are eating plants that first of all didn't exist 10,000 years ago, and second of all have been bioengineered, and we're eating this massively wide range of them, and no animal on earth does that. So you can't tell me that we are supposed to be eating all the plants that we are, and of course we're not, because that doesn't make any biological sense, and we're getting sicker. Like the health problems of humanity are getting worse.
If we were getting healthier, like, oh, well, this is a natural diet, we're getting healthier, no big deal. But we're not. We're getting much, much, much worse. And so like, we're eating out of season, we're eating tropical fruits that come, thousands of miles away. It's none of these supply chains are very stable, as we've just found out. And we need to think about like, what do we want to give our children, a world to inherit? It's like, well, hopefully it's a green one full of life, and they can live full, happy, healthy lives. And it's like, okay, well, if we're going to try to do that, then we need to focus on a species appropriate diet. And I like to be as open-minded as I possibly can. As like, I'm not sure we're obligate carnivores like cats, which are like 95%. Maybe we're just carnivorous, like 70%. Even at that low bar, we are so underfed protein and fat wise that it is hilarious. Like, I mean, if it weren't very, very dark humor, we are so far off of the 70%, and that's throwing every caveat and every bone we could possibly give out of charity to people who want to eat other things. They should at least be animal based, and we're way off that mark.
Yeah, I think in America, we're 70% plant-based at the moment. We get 70% of our calories come from plants, most of that from grain, carbs, and garbage like that. And the rest like seed oils and things like that, because you're supposed to really limit the amount of saturated fat. And obviously protein will get in there as well. But most of that is coming from plants. And I think that's the opposite. At the very least, you should be getting, like you say, more than 70%. And it always depends on your definition of obligate carnivore or not. I mean, I think that we are obligated to eat meat. There's no doubt about that. And so, there are things in meat that you have to have that you cannot get from plants. There's nothing in plants that you have to have that you cannot get from meat. And in fact, there are things in plants that will detract from your health and block the absorption of nutrients and disrupt your own digestion and utilization of these nutrients. So it can actually cause harm. And so I think by that measure, we really are obligate carnivores. Now, does that mean that we can't survive on some plant material? No, we're actually a very robust species. And that's likely why we've been so successful, is because, since the megafauna went down, we were able to sort of figure out other ways of getting nutrition, but it's cost us. that has cost us our health. Our average height has gone down significantly. Our average health has gone down. Jaw size, teeth development, all these things have gone down. Brain development, brain size and development have gone down. So cavemen were smarter than us. We have more technology. We have more information accumulated over generations. They were smarter,
Absolutely.
and, but we can get that back. But it'll actually take probably generations. There was an interesting study called Pottinger's cats that you can look up on YouTube. There's an interesting video on it, and it's like in the sort of the 20s and 30s, something like that. This guy was looking at cats, and they wanted to do different experiments with tuberculosis, and they found that the cats that they were feeding just cooked meat from the kitchen there, they weren't very healthy, and they were dying pretty easily after they do the surgery. They're taking out the adrenal glands above the kidneys. And they're saying that, well, the surgery is going fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but all these cats are dying. And then they found that these other cats, they didn't have the resources to cook meat for, so they were just giving some raw meat that actually they were fine. They didn't have any problems. They were surviving surgery, no problem. So he said, okay, or is there a different nutrient content in cooked meat versus uncooked meat that they're missing out on something? And they found that there was, that the animals eating cooked meat were much less healthy and much less robust, and had less bone mineral density. The calcium levels were a little bit lower, and the second generation was much lower. It was only like, instead of 14% calcium, it was 7% calcium, and they were getting more fractures. They had lower libidos. They just acted just a bit off, and they were smaller, and their brains were smaller, and facial structures were not as well developed. The third generation was even worse. They were severely underdeveloped. Their brains were much smaller. Their bone mineral density was now 3%. And so there's like spongy, like foam rubber texture to the bones. And after that, they were sterile. They couldn't actually conceive, or if they did, they'd have stillbirths. So they couldn't even go past the third generation on actual just cooked meat, right? And so they try to say, okay, well, let's reverse this. Let's just put them back on raw meat. And the raw meat ones were doing great the whole time. And they put them back on raw meat. They were eventually able to get back to the health and stature of the raw meat cats, but it took 4 generations. So there's all this epigenetic effect. You're turning on and turning off different genes that have generational effects. So we can live much better lives feeding ourselves optimally. Our kids will be even better. Their kids will be better than that. Their kids will be better than that. And maybe we'll get back to our evolutionary past of being nearly 7 foot tall, strong as hell, and smart as anything. And that would be something pretty cool to see if I'm lucky enough to see that. But hopefully, my kids and grandkids and their kids, etc., will at least learn these lessons properly and be able to help themselves.
That's the dream. I mean, that's what it's all about. It's about human life and flourishing. And it's so disheartening to hear these these Malthusian, like misanthropic kind of like just anti-human sentiments of like pro-earth, but not humans. And it's like, how are they getting away with that kind of rhetoric? It's human flourishing, anti-genocide should be a given. And then the conversation should be, well, how best to optimize that? And the fact that that's not the starting point means we're not having a rational debate here. And so it's really up to us and the community to foster these ideas for the sake of what you just said, like for the future of human flourishing consciousness. We have to be using the right currencies, and biologically that's meat.
Yeah, I think so too. And hopefully this will just, get more and more out there. I think the people that are figuring out carnivore now, they're at an advantage, but their kids are going to be at a massive advantage, because they're going to be some of the few people that have developed properly, and they're going to be at a massive, massive advantage intellectually and physically. And they're not going to have all the health issues and other such problems that can plague other, growing kids and young adults, and hopefully won't have the same mental health issues that others do as well. And they're going to be head and shoulders above their peers. And if they work hard and really take advantage of that, they will be in very, very good stead to be very successful and happy throughout their lives. And, I want to get this message out there. I do want everyone to get healthy, and especially their kids to be healthy. But I'm just conscious of the fact that I should probably start having kids now so that my kids have that advantage, and so that they, they're
Yeah.
still in that with the generation of like most people are not doing the right thing. So they can just be, at an advantage. But I do hope this gets around. I do hope that everyone eventually sees the light to this and just helps themselves and their kids.
Well, as someone who really enjoys your channel, like I think what you're doing, getting the message out, is really, really important. Like it may not be your kids, but like the community's kids.
Mhm.
Like you are inspiring and being a voice to this, competent science and this, it's not a religious thing, but it is good news that like for a lot of these conditions, this diet is helping. I heard you talk about like people are in your live, like people are asking you questions. Does it help this? Does it help that? Does it help this? It's like, and every time you're being patient in your answer, it's like, well, I think this is a species appropriate, diet for humans. So, from my point of view, like everything that is going wrong, even your latest breakup, like it will also help. Like, eating poison is, not eating poison is its own reward.
Yeah.
It's whatever you're struggling with. It's not a panacea. It won't cure everything. It won't grow your leg back if you lose it. But, if you've lost your leg, wouldn't it be great if you felt better and that your surgery is healed faster so you get fitted for your prosthesis and get back out there? It's like in every circumstance, it's not going to be a get rich quick. It's not going to be all your problems are gone, but you will be present. You will be mentally awake. You will be as strong as you could be eating a species appropriate diet. And I think what you're doing, spreading that message, is helping to save an entire generation.
Oh, well, thank you. And I hope it does. I hope it does help people. And it's nice to get the feedback from people like yourself and others. I get a lot of messages about people saying, I mean, it's sort of hard to take, sort of know how to take it when people say, I've found your videos and it's like literally saved my life. I was on the verge of suicide. I had all these health issues. And it's like, I don't think that I can take the credit for that, but I'm glad that something in my videos has inspired someone to make these changes in their life that has allowed them to become much more healthy and happy. It's very humbling seeing those sorts of things, but I get very, very nervous sometimes because, especially when I have a bigger platform, I think to myself like, okay, am I right? Am I leading people astray? Like that's my worst fear. And so that's why I continue to look into these things. I continue to have conversations with different people. I continue to debate with vegans and vegetarians that are on the other side of this, and like, okay, what am I missing? What have you got for me? Let's go. And so far, I really do think that everything's lining up, that this is what we should be doing, and this is our optimal way of eating. And it's nice to get that feedback when people are saying, yes, it actually has really helped me and helped change my life. So it's very humbling, seeing those sorts of messages, but it's very good to see.
I think it's important. And I think we needed another strict carnivore MD, somebody who has the credentials and the experience, both academically and athletically. I think that's absolutely critical to promote the message and do it efficaciously. So it's not enough to be able to cite a study, but not to be able to go on the field and prove it. We need both. And so we want somebody who looks healthy to be an advocate, to spread this message. And we see it in the Facebook groups, like especially those who have been in the Facebook groups since this recent surge in popularity. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of relativism and, just kind of this lost angst where people are relapsing and getting misled by poor sources of information. And anyone who has gone too far down, you know, to bring in current events, the liver, you know, the liver king, and the supplements and the organs and the honey. It's like, it's really, it's a tricky, slippery slope. I've seen people do it responsibly and in moderation, but it's just like any other negative thing. Like if people who want to drink once a year, you know, for a special occasion, I've heard you mention that, like, you know, if you want to, you know, you're going to feel like crap. And it's like, it's a choice. It's like, you don't have to never drink ever, but like, if you did it every day, you would hate yourself. So it's like, you're not going to do it. You're just going to choose not to, not out of like a religious thing, but just not choosing that as your daily life, and you love how you feel. People are getting confused and lost by that in these Facebook groups. It's hard to keep the message clear, and a lot of them are having to go private because of this, where the information just gets too burdensome to monitor and manage, to try to have the quality people answer the questions, the people who are 10-year veterans like yourself, who have lived it and know the science and know how it works in their bodies. It's like, that's who we need answering the question, not just the first person who's available within 2 minutes, you know? And so it becomes this logistical challenge that I think the louder these YouTube voices can get and these podcasts can get in propagating information that they know works, that they practice what they preach, and that they aren't defrauding people, I think that's critical for the health of the movement going forward.
Yeah. And and as you say, just sort of the more voices get out there, more quality voices, you know, at least we can have an open discussion, and we can have a lot of information out. There's so many different pieces of information, so many different people like myself that are saying different things and saying, hey, this is what I really think is going on, and polar opposites, right? And some are very, you know, it's like slightly different, like, you know, Dr. Saladino and myself, or, you know, Ken Berry and Saladino and all these sorts of things. There's slight differences, but an overarching message will be the same with some differences, and or maybe polar opposites, like, you know, Gregor or Dean Ornish and all that sort of stuff. Very, very different. And so it's difficult for people to know what to believe. Who do I believe? Well, you don't have to believe anyone. Look at the evidence that is provided and then decide for yourself, and saying that,
share
well,
your experience.
That's it. And so, you know, like if you look at the study, like I try to put studies in, you know, when I'm talking about a specific subject, I'll try and put studies that I discuss in those descriptions. So I try to make my sources open, and people can check. And I tell them, check my references. You know, if you don't agree, if you say, like, you look at those same things and you just say, well, I don't come to that same conclusion, that's fine. You know, and that's why I put them there, to make sure that people aren't just taking my word for it, that they're looking at this and like, look, this is evidence-based, and this evidence is either good or bad by their determination, and they'll either believe it or not based on that. And other people will say, well, there's this, you know, epidemiological survey that we sent out to 12 people, and they all said that they feel better eating vegetables. And like, great, if you want to believe that nonsense, you can, but here's something with 30,000 patients, and it shows exactly the opposite of what they're showing. And so you just have to look at that, and you have to be able to, you know, you have to start being able to get accustomed to reading studies and understanding them. But, you know, that is something that we should all aim to do, is that we do, you know, we look at the arguments, we look at both sides, we look at the evidence presented, and then we check their references. So we don't just take their word for it, check their references to see if, like, well, did they come to the right conclusion based on that evidence? A lot of times they're not. You know, a lot of times you see a study, you always read the study. You never just read the conclusions. You read the whole study, because oftentimes a conclusion does not meet with what the study actually showed. They come to a conclusion that I would not come to, a lot of these things. And so you have to read the study yourself, and you just say, okay, do I agree with that conclusion or not? What conclusion will I draw from that? And then you make a decision yourself.
Or the methodology is just total bogus. So I take a whole college course on reading scientific studies, like on p-values and statistical significance, and like your abstract versus your methodology, and all these like ins and outs. Like, if you don't know what that means, they could just they could just funnel you towards the conclusion they want you to read off. And a lot of the data sets for the studies that are the foundation of all of what we do scientifically with human health are behind paywalls. Like they're locked. And then even when you get in the paywall, you don't have access to the raw data. You have access to the filtered data.
Yeah.
And so you have to get special academic permission to see what big frauds they are. Like came out with the China study or all kinds of different things like that. It's just, they didn't share the data in an unfiltered way. They told you what the answer was and then just said, believe us. And that's not science.
No, it's not. And, evidence is, I mean, that the origin of that word is what is evident, what can be seen, right? That's what evidence means, that which can be seen. So we could see this and then we, make a decision. And a lot of those things, whenever someone won't share their data, their raw data, something's up. And there are a lot of these studies that you can't even get academic permission. They will not release their raw data. Anytime that happens, you need to be extremely suspicious of the conclusions that they draw, if not outright, just completely just say, well, I'm not even going to pay attention to that. Because if you're not willing to show your raw data, if you're not really willing to show your work, then I can't trust you. I can't trust your conclusion. I can't trust your study. I have no idea what your study is. I have no idea if any of this is accurate. I have no idea because you won't show your work. And so they'll be behind a paywall, but oftentimes in certain ones, I can think of some specific examples, but they're the authors that have been sort of challenged, like, hey, is this really true? Can you show us your work? Can I look at your raw data? And they just refuse. Something's up.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's just absolutely insane what passes for established fact that has just never been explored. We in the low carb community have tried eating less carbs and found amazing success. And so we're primed already because we have this evidence that we experienced in our bodies. And we're like, okay, what else is complete BS? And it's like, maybe plants, like all of them. Like, so it's like, okay, so we're primed to, okay, what other thing are you not sharing? But, that's where without good guys like yourself, the conspiracy theories can get a little out there. And it really helps to have educated guides to like keep us on the rails, keep us skeptical, but keep us grounded too.
Yeah. Well, hopefully there'll be more and more and more people out there voicing this and getting the information out there, and then actually getting some big studies, showing that, look, here's what it is, an experiment, and we don't need to guess anymore. We actually have big, robust studies. So hopefully that can happen. Great. Well, Phil, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. It was a great time speaking with you and picking your brain on all of this. So I appreciate you coming on. How can people get a hold of you? How can people reach out to you? And, how do people order Carnivore Bar?
So it's just carnivorebar.com. We're active on Instagram. We're getting more active on Twitter. We have a Facebook, but it's kind of Instagram is the place to be for carnivore brands for whatever reason. And we do answer our messages. You can get it in an ammo box, just a 50 cal round ammo box. We're primarily, unfortunately, doing the States. So it is a little difficult to ship overseas after events of 2020. But we are working on expanding. We're going to get a barbecue bar for people who are more explorative. And then on the other end, we're going to go with a lamb bar. That's going to be a little more expensive, but it's going to be low histamine, because that's one of our biggest requests from our hardcore zero carb carnivores, is that we want something that has not been aged at all. And so controversial, harvesting an animal before maturity, but if you're going low carb and you're going low histamine, man, you have very few options. So we want to go deeper in that niche. And so carnivorebar.com.
Awesome. And obviously, I'm an affiliate on that. So you guys can use my discount code that's in the description of my videos, and for discount on that. Phil, thank you so much for coming on. Hope to do it again sometime soon.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man.